You are experiencing performance anxiety with Mark Shea. This week we have Robert Roth joining us. Robert is one-third of the criminally underrated band Truly. He's also half of the psychedelic folk duo LittleSpirits. Robert's career is one of the most interesting stories to come out of 90s Seattle. From jamming with pre-Dave Grohl Nirvana, to forming Truly with members of Screaming Trees and Soundgarden, to working with punk poet Jim Carroll, Robert's story is still adding chapters. Here's Performance Anxiety with Robert Roth.
Hello, this is Robert Roth from LittleSpirits. Performance Anxiety. Thank you for having me on the show.
How far away is Olympia from Seattle?
It's about an hour, 15-minute drive, maybe an hour and a half, depending on traffic.
All right, so it's not too bad.
No, not at all. But when I grew up there, Seattle, really, really far.
Oh, yeah.
And so being underage for a lot of the kinds of things I wanted to see, being young, the things I wanted to see were big concerts like Queen and Van Halen and Cheap Trick. I had to go up to Seattle, and we'd buy our tickets, take a day off school and go to Seattle to go to a rock concert.
Oh, so what was your first concert?
My dad took me to a lot of jazz and stuff. In fact, we went and saw the first, in Tears at the Paramount Theater in 1975 with David Clayton Thomas back in the band singing, and that was fantastic. But as far as in 1979, when I was 13, I got to see my favorite band, Kiss, and also my other favorite band, Earth, Wind, and Fire, the same week at the same place.
Oh, man.
Like 4 days apart. It was like in November of 79. And it was like Kiss's last gig, or third or fourth to last gig with the original lineup.
Oh, man.
And that was super exciting.
Well, those are some good.
But then, the next year I went and saw Queen, which on the Game tour, which was like Live Killers plus the Game, which I think to me, even looking back, that probably was the best tour, in my opinion, their best material.
Right.
And that was amazing. And I went with my 14. I was 14 on my first big date, so that was cool. So my girlfriend was trying to make out with me the entire show. We were right up front. I had like one eye open, looking at the stage.
Well, those are some good shows to start with, that's for sure.
Yeah, I saw Van Halen. Well, I said Van Halen. That was cool. That was the Fair Warning tour. So we again skipped school. I was 15, 81, and then we hung around Seattle Center, and you could hear Eddie Van Halen sound check for like an hour. It was so loud and amazing. Who else? I think I said Cheap Trick. Back in those days, The Who and The Clash.
Oh, wow. Fantastic.
And
artists.
T-Bone Burnett with Mick Ronson playing guitar with him. It's crazy to look back at the ticket price. And let's see, I saw U2 on the War Tour and got to meet Bono after the show. And
oh, wow.
Anyway,
jealous on some of these bands.
It's crazy to look back. And they were I guess, affordable at the time.
Yeah.
To go see bands and buy records.
Yeah.
You'd save your money, and it was a big deal.
Yeah. We're making less, but it still seems a lot more affordable than a lot of the tickets that for the bigger names, at least when you go to like around here, the big venue is the Jiffy Lube Arena, and that's where all the the really huge artists go, and crap tickets are $65. Yeah, it's ridiculous. That's why that's what and to be honest, and just to let everyone know, I'm talking with Robert Roth from the band Truly and LittleSpirits here. That's kind of why I started, besides the music being great, that's one of the reasons why I started following bands like Truly, bands that hadn't really hit yet. Bands with their first albums, because they would play the smaller clubs. Or to go see them. And you could even... One of the things that I learned early on is if you hang out afterwards, you can meet the guys in the band and sit down and talk with them for a while. And that's one of the things I always liked about especially from the 90s, the Seattle. Even when you guys would come to the East Coast, I know you had you're going from tour to tour to tour.
Yeah.
And well, I think
yeah. Well, I mean, to me, very early age, I started playing professionally even at a young age, 15, 16. But I always really longed to be part of a music community. I think that the punk rock scene and other places around the country and around the world that sometimes happen in real small places, college towns or even rural towns, or in parts of the city where people can afford to live and be in bands. Those local scenes, I think, are what really help good music gestate and versus just bands that come out of nowhere in the some suburb, and you're like, okay, those types of bands are mostly drawing on what they get through the media, and the bands that are out in their communities, going to shows, talking to other bands, talking to fans, building a community. I think that that's how the Seattle scene became a scene. Is just that whole cross-pollination of ideas among.
Yeah, and I think Truly was a perfect example of that, because you came in from a completely different band, Storybook Crooks, with your brother in that, if I remember correctly, and some other folks, and you started jamming with, it was Mark first, correct? You pick roll.
It was Truly, yeah.
And then he spoke with Hiro Yamamoto. And, a lot of times you'll hear about guys that, no, I'm not going to play with these guys, especially larger bigger names back in that time period, late 80s, early 90s. Egos seemed to be outrageous because, you had bands like Guns N' Roses and stuff. And that I always loved about the music from that time period, especially Seattle. And I'll probably get hung up on your location here a little bit, because that was what I dove into it. I loved it once I found out about it. The side projects, you'd have your main band, and then you'd have another band that you were working on, and nobody was afraid to work with other people.
Right.
And that's the one thing that I really love, because you would get a guy who could play in a band and have a certain sound with one band, and everybody just seemed free to experiment and
I wonder, as you're talking about that, I wonder if some of that isn't because the original, whatever, the first wave or two of Seattle bands were made up of musicians who had been doing it a while, versus like maybe the punk rock bands of the 70s. Maybe they were a little bit younger. And so by being around a little longer, people had their earlier interests they could go back to, or just more willing to try new things and experiment. The grunge sound had really peaked in Seattle by 89. By 1990, I think people were thinking about, well, what's the next step creatively, musically? And Pearl Jam and the sound, everything, that's when the world picked up on grunge. But in Seattle, a lot of us had moved on prior to Nevermind.
That's fascinating to me.
Yeah.
So you mentioned Nevermind.
I don't mean moved on completely. I just mean what else could be done, with that and beyond that. So,
expand that palette that you guys had. Had kind of created, because it was based on a lot of different styles of music. But you mentioned Nevermind.
The uniformity originally, even before Truly, obviously there was Sub Pop and Charles Peterson's photos and Jack Endino's signature production, and there was a real conscious effort on Sub Pop to make it something uniform. And like I said, I think that when Truly came about, we had Charles Peterson do our photo as well, but it was the first full color cover of Charles Peterson on a Sub Pop. We did 24-track recording, whereas up till then, I think it was strictly 8-track. Maybe there was a few 16-track recordings. So we kind of took up the fidelity and the color, and it was kind of part of forward momentum and change,
And at that time, I was a photography student up in Rochester, New York, and I remember picking up Sub Pop singles and albums and EPs from Sound. And, Charles Peterson's work had a big impact on me. The emotion that you could see in it was just amazing. And I tried to emulate that as much as I could, unsuccessfully, because I'm not a professional photographer anymore. Did it for 10 years, but I haven't been as successful as he has. But I want to pick back up on something that you'd mentioned when you mentioned Nevermind by Nirvana coming out. Or the world kind of gravitating towards Nirvana.
Well, it was like a second wave of grunge, but a much larger. And that's when I finally accepted the term grunge, because after a certain while, it was a label that everyone resented. And the Seattle band back then was like, "Oh, we're not grunge. Or grunge is, there's no such thing as grunge or whatever." But 25 years later, for the sake of conversation, we call it grunge, just like we call certain things punk.
Right.
Which may or may not be punk, whatever.
So before Nevermind blew up and brought some clarity, I guess, back into music you could hear on the radio, you actually had the opportunity to play with Kurt and I guess kind of jam with him. How did that happen? What was that? What was the situation surrounding that?
Well, my first and only band prior to Truly just broken up. Like you said, it was my brother John. It was my best friend from 8th grade who went to the Kiss concert with me in 8th grade. So we had gone through a lot of, various formations. We had started playing professionally, like when I was 16, playing big beer gardens up at Western Washington University and Evergreen State College for hundreds of people, other like punk, new wave type bands, and we were on the local college radio, and oh
wow,
it was we and I think, as I was saying the other night when I was talking to you, that why we were able to do that was that we played our own material, and most of the bands around at that time who were our age or even in their 20s, they were cover bands. So a band that took their own material somewhat seriously even was taken seriously, and there were far and few between, believe it or not. Now it's a real, obviously normal thing. It's hundreds of them. So that was how we were able to progress at a young. I forgot the question. Sorry.
What brought you together with Cobain? And I know that you had.
Okay. So I got sidetracked there talking about my first band. So anyway, we had broken up. And riding the bus with and Jonathan Poneman was on the bus, and he was president of Sub Pop. So he asked me what was up with the band, Starbuck Crooks, and they were fans, and so he had been keeping up on what we were up to, and he asked me about the band. I said we had just broken up. He said Nirvana has just sort of kicked out / Jason quit to replace Hero and Soundgarden.
Right, Jason Everman, right?
What's Everman? Yeah. So they didn't get along with him as far as their outlook on things. And anyway, so Jonathan had said that Kurt was looking for somebody who could write songs, potentially sing a song or two on an album, but mostly back him up on guitar. But somebody more song oriented. Maybe more pop song oriented even, because Jason they kind of thought of him more as a metalhead or something. So I went down I had given a cassette to a friend of mine, Justin, who worked with Mark Lanigan, who gave the tape to Kurt. And I went to a Tad show at the Vogue and into Kurt. And he said, Mark gave me your tape, but I hadn't had a chance to listen to it yet. And Kurt and I hung out for probably an hour and a half and just talked about music, drank beers, and
listened to Tad.
And listened to Tad too. Yeah, we did. Yeah, we listened. We caught the end of his set because we were talking the whole time about just trying to read each other's gauge each other's music taste and right. all that, and so got on really well, and one of the things that he said was like, we want to smash guitars, and Jason isn't into smashing guitars. And I was fairly my equipment, even as a poor musician. I'm like, no, I'm down with that. So at the end of the conversation, he said, it looks like we're on the same wavelength. We should get together and play when we get back from our tour. And they were like in a week or two for 3 weeks. And being in my early 20s and 3 weeks sounding like a million years to me, or, an indefinite, not real amount of time.
Right.
I said, well, by that time, I'm going to be another band. So if you want to try me out, you should do it before you leave.
Yeah.
And as it turns out, they schlepped all their gear up to my rehearsal space, and there was downstairs. So that was a huge schlep up some really old rickety stairs. But and they were so fucking loud. It was so impressive to me. It changed my life because I brought in 100-watt PV amp. It's called a PV Vintage, and PV has a sketchy reputation, but their early 70s amps were amazing. And Kurt knew that. He's got a PV Vintage. But Kurt had a big stack mic'd up through the PA. Dad was miking his kick drum. I mean, it was full fucking concert volume loud,
Wow.
And my PV Vintage could not cope. So I played through Kurt's rig and Kurt played through mine. But we played a bunch of their songs, and I learned a couple on my own that they hadn't suggested, like About a Girl and Mr. Mustard. And we also just kind of jammed a lot, made a bunch of kind of noise, a lot of fun, and played one of my songs that Kurt really liked. He said it was very catchy.
Oh, cool.
And I wrote, and then I kind of waited to hear what was going to happen. They went on tour as a 3-piece, and I had written a song for my potential joining the band called Stain on Your Plane. It was just 7-inch for Sub Pop was Stain, and then Nevermind had On a Plane.
Yeah.
And my demo went missing around that time. Honestly, but it did. It has gone missing.
Breaking news.
I would love to find that, but I have boxes of, who knows, it's probably in there somewhere. But no, it's just one of those coincidences that just, but.
You guys didn't happen to record that session, did you?
No, I would have felt weird, I think, at the time. I would have felt, like, hey, can I record? Like,
Yeah.
But anyway, so Kurt and I hung out for another hour or so, just talking and sharing the last few cigarettes we had, and discussing what the band could look like with me in the band, and without coming out and saying it, I think we both were like, well, maybe Chad's not the best drummer for the band.
Yeah.
He's great part of the band. Yeah, there's something kind of missing sonically. And I think that Kurt had said his favorite drummer was John Bonham, and mine was Moon. And it's interesting because he ended up with Dave Grohl, who's very much a Bonham for our times,
yes.
In terms of really heavy, solid, and yet very personal feeling. And then Pickerel is just throwing his sticks. He's a magician and a wizard on the drums. So that worked out. But maybe in some other universe, I don't know. We could have ended up in the same band. Pickerel was playing in the Jury or whatever they called with Lanigan and Kurt and Chris. And so it could have gone another direction.
Is that the group that did the blues songs for?
They did all Lead Belly covers.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, and I think 3 of those songs are on the Nirvana box set.
Yeah.
Mark on drums. So it's Mark, Chris, and Kurt.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So then you ended up jamming with Mark in the studio. Was it in the studio?
Yeah. So I talked to Kurt, and he just said, we are going to say a 3-piece. We toured that way. We liked it. And a week later, I heard that Mark Pickerel from Kelly Canary, from an all-girl grunge group called Dickless. Yeah.
Yeah, I love. It's going to sound weird, but yeah, I love Dickless and Teen Angels. I saw
them, and they practiced in that same building too. So I used to go with them when I was down there taking breaks or whatever. They were super super cool and
Saddle Tramp, and then Sweet Teeth.
Yeah.
Man, I've got. I think they only have 2 7-inches, I believe, that I know of.
Yeah, it was kind of short lived, but they were cool.
It came out with Teen Angels, which was kind of similar,
but so she's the one who gave me Mark's number, because Donna was Mark's girlfriend. John was the bass. We all worked at a place called Peaches Records where Lanigan worked. Dylan from Earth, and I think Pickerel worked there for 4 hours before he just left because he didn't like it and quit. But there was a lot of musicians worked there. So I called Mark, and he agreed to get together with me, which looking back, yeah, as you said, that's kind of strange. Like he didn't even know who I was. Maybe he did. I don't think he did. And I think I must have sent him a tape or something. I don't know. I convinced him somehow to come over to our house in the U District and play. And he really loved the songs. I think The Color Is Magic was one of them. And
okay.
I had another song called She Is Bread, which I later jettisoned because it was basically Dancing Barefoot by Patti Smith, but I had never heard Dancing Barefoot. I wrote it without ever hearing it. Heard it. I was like, okay, can't do that. It's already, amazing song with these same chords. So, but no, we had another couple of things maybe that ended up. But he said he really liked it. He worked at Sub Pop at the time, and he set up a meeting with Jonathan, and I came down and played him some of my 4-track tapes. And
so, how did Hero get involved?
Hero got involved. Played our very first show at a place called the Off Ramp, and another band called Sister Double Happiness.
I remember Sister Double Happiness. Oh my gosh, bringing back memories of college.
That was our very first show. It was packed and sold out. Everybody was there, from Kim Thiel to Calvin, from Beat Happening, Pop Crowd. It was our very first gig, and just kind of overwhelming, but really, really exciting to have Mark back there with his sticks flying around, and it was super exciting. And for our first gig, I think it went really well. Now, were you
guys a quartet at that point? Was Chris?
We were just a 3-piece because that's what my previous band had been. And on bass, the bass player was Chris Quinn, who actually played bass on the first 3 songs on our Sub Pop EP. Because Hero only played on Married in the Playground on that EP. So a lot of people know that, but so anyway, now that Married in the Playground was the only thing we recorded as a 4-piece. It's the only thing that Chris ever played guitar on.
Oh, okay. I didn't know that.
So that's how it started. I think that was like maybe October 1990, and the month before that we had gone into Robert Lang Studios and recorded Color Is Magic, Heart and Lungs, and the song Truly, which became titled Truly Drowning when the name of the band came up. Let's call it Truly, and song same title as the band. Yeah, I was not sure about the band name, but Chris had come up with that while we were in the studio. Mark had just quit the Trees a week prior to the session, and Chris had just quit his band that morning. Oh, wow. So they were just going to be my session guys, And so while in the studio, there was a lot of excitement, and we would be a band. And Chris said, how about Truly? And so that's kind of a weird name for a band. But so the next Monday, Mark goes to work and tells Jonathan about the recording session, and asks Jonathan, what should we call the band? And Jonathan's like, how about True? Wow. So two people came up with it. We figured out there's something to it.
Yeah, that meant something.
Well, yeah, I got used to it after a while.
And the EP.
Yeah, right? Okay. Like almost a full year after we had really tracked those songs. So those were Married in the Playground when Sub Pop decided to do it. And it's funny because when I went down to play Jonathan the demos and some of the stuff, he had just found out that day that Nirvana was leaving Sub Pop, fucking pissed.
Oh, okay.
And it's all blown over, and they all became friends. But at that day, man, it was another 3-piece band with some decent songs, and him throwing papers around his desk, and then when I put in the cassette, he was very receptive.
That's good.
He was very open to it, and he was a big fan and champion of the band. He came to us in the studio, first cut Chlorine when it was going to be for Sub Pop. I mean, 11.5 minute song. It's like Marquee Moon or Television or so. Anyway, but that Playground was a song that I had written around that time after Hero had joined, and it was a real pop song, and I was kind of afraid. It was more the kind of song I would have done with my previous band. but everyone really liked it. And I think that, as I said earlier, people in Seattle were moving on away from grunge. My conversation with Kurt at the Vogue that night, one of the things he said, because I was just getting turned on to Nirvana and Melvins. Like, I had kind of come from a more of a psychedelic and pop and Paisley Underground, whatever kind of world, punk rock too, in the mid-late 80s. So I was, Bleach blew me away, like heaviness of it. Yeah, it was so melodic. But Kurt was like, no, we want to be more like the Pixies. We want to get the college kids. Literally what he said. And I was like, oh, okay, cool. And so he was kind of mentally moving on from that point. So a song like Married in the Playground and a poppier thing that was people were real receptive to it. So they kind of, Jonathan and Mark had really, took me aside and said, look, we're going to do this EP, but this song has to be on there. And so that was it. And that one, was in the top 10 requested songs of the day at the local FM big station, which is called 107.7.
Okay.
Whatever. And so, it was a good song for us in the Northwest.
The song that really sticks out to me on that is Heart and Lungs. And I know that especially now talking with you for a couple of years on and off now, and the re-release of the single soundtrack. What happened? How did that get left off the album?
Well, what happened was about a week before it was pressed, there was a certain amount of political pressure exerted from managers of some of the bands to get more of their songs on there. In the case of Screaming Trees, the band, this is not because of the band, but their management really wanted them on the album because it was looking like the album was going to be a bigger deal than it had been sitting in the can for a while. Okay. And it was the weight of the Seattle explosion that was the real thrust to that movie actually coming out. So anyway, added more songs by these other bands, and their song's not even in the movie. Nearly Lost You's not in singles. Oh, great song, Yeah. But that song literally took the spot of Heart and Lungs. Wow. We were on the advanced CDs and whatnot, but oh man, and it sold a lot. It would have changed our lives financially. But who knows? Maybe, I think we ended up eventually getting signed to Capitol Records and making cool music. And who knows how things would have gone had that happened. And maybe not as well. Maybe it's cool to see it finally have come out. And
so you got signed to Capitol and worked on your record. If you read any review, everybody says it is an amazing album. And I agree with that completely. But it came out in 95. What was the reason for the gap, and what were you guys doing during that time? Touring a lot, or I know you guys played at Lollapalooza in 92.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we started working on what became that record, but I guess our first album when we were still on Sub Pop, and two of those songs were recorded as far back as 92. Chlorine, the last song, and another song called Hot Summer in 1991. And they were sort of cornerstones of the sort of, I don't know, the theme of the album.
Okay.
Well, I won't say concepts necessarily because that's a little too particularly deliberate, but there was a theme that I was working on, and so in 92 we played a lot. Really, the EP came out at the end of 91. A lot of the promoting of that and playing behind it was in 92, and then 93 we put out another Sub Pop single and an EP. And at that point, Sub Pop were having financial trouble and couldn't afford to finish the record and for the amount of money that we had previously agreed. Essentially what happened was we got dropped from the single soundtrack, and our budget went from $25,000 to make a record to not enough to make a record. The kind of record we wanted to make. And I was trying to do it, and it was hard. And so based on the strength of the EP, or at least, I perceived it as being a strong contender for what was going on. I felt really confident that we would get signed by a major label. And that was my way to finish the record. Now is just like get a nice computer and some mic.
Yeah, no kidding.
But then the only way to finish a record, get signed by a major label. So I was determined to finish this record. And we did get signed to Capitol. And that whole process took a while. They wanted us to wait even longer to record.
Oh, really?
And I really felt an urgency. I felt like too much time was going. But we did take about, we got signed in late 93. The record came out in mid 95. So that tells you how long, that whole major label process take. And that was with me being in a rush. In other words, we signed our contracts, I think, and finally signed it in December. I had us in the studio in January, spending money, demoing, and just kind of living at my friend's cheap punk rock studio, but still 24-track studio. Just writing and woodshedding and creating it. I wanted to get it out. It was like two major tracking sessions, and then finishing all that, and then flying to New York and mixing for 5 weeks.
And I remember reading somewhere that sometime between you guys getting signed and the album coming out, that everybody you had worked with at Capitol had gotten the axe.
Well, it wasn't everybody, but it was the people that had signed us. They were called Revolution Records, and they had signed Big Chief, and they had signed Truly. They were trying to sign a band called Neurosis. They were trying to sign the John Spencer Blues Explosion.
Okay, yeah.
And they were I guess you could call it not a boutique label, a subsidiary label of Capitol.
Okay.
And where they were going to have a lot of autonomy to do what they wanted. And they wanted to release Chlorine, an 11.5-minute song, to radio as our first single. They had some kind of cool ideas, but the struggle to make that record and finish it, I had looked, getting signed to Capitol Records was a dream come true, but I knew that wasn't a dream. That was the beginning, because, the highway was littered with bands with major label contracts whose records never came out, who got dropped within a week, the casualties were everywhere, including some very successful bands. So I was pretty realistic about our chances, even having gotten signed. In the 70s, you were given a few chances. They believed in you. They would give you records. You kind of had to prove something on your first record. And
As Stories comes out and you guys tour, and how does the second album come out? Because you guys left Capitol. And we
asked to leave. We weren't dropped.
Right. You did ask to leave Capitol. And so your next record comes out on I know my copy is on Thick Records. And it's still definitely a Truly album, but it's a different sound to it. Maybe more focused. The songs are I guess I don't say not as long or not, but they're just, everything seems to be a little more focused and a little more electronics, a little more keyboards and stuff. Was that intentional? Was that a sound you guys were definitely looking to?
Well, thing about Feeling You Up was it was never meant to a real follow up kind of thing, because it was mostly demos that were left over.
Okay.
And when we left Capitol, we were approached by an independent label in Chicago who wanted to do an EP of some of the things that we had left over. And as we were leaving Capitol, they were having us go in the studio, and in that we were invited back to England because of the success of Fast Stories from Kid Coma over there in the press. And he had Fast Stories in their top 20 records of 1995, even though we never made the video. We had K-Rock in LA playing our song. It cost $100,000 to release a single, apparently, in those days. But we were getting airplay. So all these opportunities to make that record successful were stymied by the fact that Capitol was undergoing a lot of turbulence in terms of money, and EMI was going to potentially be up for sale. So it was all these, factors. And so I turned in the song, one of the demos, called Leatherette Tears. Now that time has been rolling by, see who you are. It was just a song that I have written, kind of just haunted my brain. 4.5 months of touring. This song had just been following me around. Yeah. We were playing it at Soundcheck in Europe, and this is while we're playing pretty much Fast Stories material live, like really heavy, loud shit live. Yeah. Had kind of written this cheerful, wistful pop song,
almost Beach Boys-ish.
What's that?
It almost like a Beach Boys feel to it.
Kind of Phil Spector.
Yeah, it's one of my favorite songs. I love it. I absolutely love
thank you, man. Thank you. And so, and just like Married in the Playground, and everybody really loved it. And it was like, it felt refreshing compared to the kind of more melancholy stuff that we do, and especially on Fast Stories from Kid Coma. So, and I think with the kind of Kurt dying and whatnot, I think that people were kind of trying to forget about a lot of things and not wallowing in darkness and dark music. People, I think around the Northwest were kind of wanting a break from that in some way.
Okay.
And that's why I think a band like the Presidents of the United States, I think they were like the biggest band in 95 in the Northwest, around just in terms of like the local scene, the people that were all around going to the grunge shows. Everyone kind of had flipped a switch to that. I honestly just feel it was a need to escape.
That makes sense.
And, it's just forget to take a break from the, it was heavy times.
Yeah.
But, Seattle's never the same. The dance music .com is taking over the whole city. That's another story.
Yeah, they're about to do the same over here by me.
Were just leftover songs and like Leatherette Tears. When Capitol heard Leatherette Tears, they wanted us to do a whole album of those types of songs while we left.
Okay.
I really felt like that would have been a big mistake. I think have to follow a record like Fast Stories. And there was even a suggestion that maybe we change our name to fit this new pop sound, Really? I mean, it was just like, it was so far from the kind of conversations we were having with them in 93 when they were telling us to not worry about singles and to push the envelope and be an album-oriented band like Pink Floyd or Zeppelin, we're like, really? Are you serious? Because this would be a single. No, just don't worry about that. I'm like, cool, then all right. And anyway, the climate had really, really changed a lot. Had really changed since Kurt died, I think. People were looking for hits, quick hits, money, get to the point. So on an artistic side, I think I wanted to prove that I was also good songwriter, because that was my reputation prior to Truly was, I'm a songwriter, not Eddie Van Halen,
Right, yeah.
But with Fast Stories, I kind of was a little self-conscious that we were seen as some noise-making band. And even though looking back, I realized that's not true. I just wasn't getting any respect. I felt like from label, from people around me as a songwriter,
right.
Okay. And there's bands like Supergrass and Elliott Smith and all these.
Oh, Supergrass is great. I love Supergrass.
Yeah, we played a show with them in Detroit that was a lot of fun.
You're mentioning a whole slew of bands that I used to listen to. Like I love Big Chief, Supergrass. I've got just about everything Big Chief has ever done. So that's
no, that's great. I'll have to pass that on. You know that Mark Dancy did the cover record.
I did. Okay. Yeah, Truly has a new EP, a new single out. And let's jump into that. I want to touch on Twilight Curtains in a minute or two, but you guys do have a new single out. And it's vinyl only. There's no downloadable links. It's not.
There's a downloadable link if you buy it.
Okay. So, but that's the only way to get it. Am I correct with that?
Yeah, the only way to get the downloadable link is to buy the little vinyl.
So was that? Are you doing that just for the fans, or is it just because everything is downloadable? And I don't know if you be a little bit like me in the sense that when you buy music, you want to touch it.
Yeah, I mean, I think that I want the whole world to hear it, and so people will buy the vinyl and give them a chance the fans to have it first.
Okay.
And at some point when we'll release it digitally as well.
Okay.
But I want people who buy the vinyl to feel like they have something exclusive and buying into something that you can hang on to, but it's also something you believe in, like an artist that you believe in. And I think it's easy when music's free and disposable. I do want it to be out there, and I'm happy to have it be free at some point. Maybe not in the first 2 months.
Yeah. I agree. I mean, I
want people to cherish that thing. And hey, I had this, a few months before. You could just listen to it on Spotify.
And that's exactly what I love about this kind of stuff. I love finding but I don't feel like I own it if I just download it. Even if I've paid for the download, I don't feel like it's mine.
Yeah.
I want to ask you a couple questions about Twilight Curtains. How did that come about? Because that's it seems like a whole bunch of a couple songs from Feeling You Up on it, but there's also some covers on it, some snippets here and there. And how did that come about? And do you consider that a truly album, or is it just a compilation?
No. I consider it like a compilation of sorts. It's sort of even it's similar to Feeling You Up, but it's at least with Feeling You Up, we had a few weeks to take the pieces of demos and whatnot and go, let's see if I can make this into a cohesive album, not just a collection of songs. And so I did what I could. Whereas Twilight Curtains, it was coming out on a British label. Things on there that had never been released, so it's kind of a odds and sods kind of thing,
right.
And as I was saying earlier, I really, before we took a long break or broke up or whatever, we working on some really interesting things that were really far from what you hear on past stories. There's no way to go back to 1998 and recreate that. It wouldn't make sense now, although I think it would have held up. It's just we were still very much in a experimental, creative, forward momentum phase, and I don't think whatever the real follow up to that album, it didn't happen. Right. So to me, Feeling You Up is kind of it's an outtakes record too. So I kind of feel like what we've been working on lately is my attempt at a real proper follow up to Fast Stories. But, that is something that because I have a kid and we've toured and there's been other projects that, it's taken on its own life. And it's not a return to the 90s or definitely not a return to late 90s when whatever we're working on then. It's a new album. And it draws upon our sound in a real genuine way, just because it's just the way we play, it's the way we sound. But it's trying to do some new things.
One of the things I really enjoyed about Fast Stories and Feeling You Up, segues that you have, is that something that you have in mind as you're recording or writing the song?
Well, I think that is a sort of I do tend to make these sort of like sonic landscape things. It's really just like my therapy and my drawing in the sand or whatever, it's like, painting lovely pictures with sound, and it's at the same time, there's a real deep feeling about it. And I feel like it's sort of a third voice to the music. It's sort of a soundtrack. If the music's the soundtrack or the narration or something in between. And nowadays with the computer, now I get to do my little doodling instead of, like on a notebook or whatever, after by splicing things in. They tend to happen at the intros and the outros of the songs, which you can hear on the new single. Like you hear the interludes kind of included on Wheels on Fire, and there's just there's more of an opportunity to have that part of the music when I'm working now using the computer.
How did you get involved with Jim Carroll?
He was feeling vulnerable. That was foolish but wonderful. And of course,
Jim's wife, Rosemary Carroll, was our attorney and had been finally getting close to finishing the tracking for Fast Stories. I had heard from our manager that they were doing a movie for Basketball Diaries and that Jim Carroll needed someone to write with. The director of the movie wanted him to have a couple of his new Jim Carroll songs in the film.
Okay.
And so a few days later, he called me on the phone and we talked for probably 2 hours.
Oh, wow.
And fantastic. It was like getting a free reading, like just his stories and humor, just the stories one after another were amazing. And, but yeah, we hit it off, and within a few days, I had sent him in the mail, and we literally would hum stuff over the phone. But mostly just I would listen to hours of his stories every time we spoke on the phone. And when we went to New York to mix the Truly record, Jim had called me and left a message on studio answering machine and said, "Hey, Robert, don't be surprised, man, but Allen Ginsberg might be coming by I had this song Angel Head, which was referencing Owl, the poem by Allen Ginsberg and the Angel-Headed Hipsters, Starry Dynamo of the Night, that whole thing. And so that whole day I was really nervous that Allen Ginsberg was going to be showing up to maybe perhaps read some poetry at the end of this, fade out of the song. And I still hadn't finished my vocals, and I was trying to figure out a couple lines and whatnot. And anyway, so at the end of that record, and Allen didn't show up, apparently. Jim said that he had to go hang out with Johnny Depp because Johnny might play Kerouac on the road film. So don't guys if he shows up, but if he doesn't, don't be bummed out or anything.
Oh my
God. But who showed up was Brian Johnson and Malcolm and Rick Rubin.
Oh wow.
And I was sitting at the piano desperately trying to finish one or two lines to this song, and nervous that Ginsberg was going to be showing up any moment. And then they walked in, and I just kind of felt annoyed and invaded, and kind of probably gave them joke or whatever. And later, that was, those guys seem so fucking cool, and you just kind of blow them off. What's that? Anyway, so but after we finished that record, 2 days later, I met Jim at West Village at Cafe Orland, and we took a cab up to Williamsburg and worked in this guy named Oliver's little studio and did the vocals to these songs. And long story short, and Lenny Kaye from the Patti Smith Group worked on one of them with Jim when I wasn't piano. And what ended up happening was a person who was the music supervisor to the film. She had been Quentin Tarantino's music supervisor on Pulp Fiction, but really all she did was get the legal license. Didn't pick any of those songs. Tarantino picked every single one of those tunes.
Not surprised.
Her cachet went way up, and she was all of a sudden music supervisor to every film coming out in the next 2 years. Jeez. Her name was Karen Rockman, and her brother was Ricky Rockman from Headbangers Ball.
Oh, okay.
And Karen Rockman was bragging to Rosemary about having never read any of Jim's poetry, never read Basketball Diaries, and didn't particularly like his voice and didn't really want it on the album.
Wow.
And so a movie about his life, he was not good enough to be in as a vocalist singer of his own material. So what ended up happening was got Pearl Jam on the soundtrack. They flew Jim out. Pearl Jam flew Jim out.
Wow.
And they basically give the middle finger to the label and say, well, here's Pearl Jam.
Yeah.
Here's Jim Carroll. So that was a win for him and them. But our songs didn't make it in the movie. And they actually asked me doing the scoring.
Oh, wow.
I'm like, sure. They sent me some clips. And Eno and The Edge were the ones doing the scoring. And they had dropped out. And I lost out to Graham Revell.
Well, yeah, I mean, he did everything.
So I probably would have been way over my head, but anyway.
Well, I want to ask you a question about some of your gear. Are you a gearhead as far as guitars?
Yeah. I mean, I'm more of a recording gearhead, guitar freak who freaks out on every little part of the guitar.
Yeah.
And you know, like I'm not that kind of a gearhead. Like I don't work on my guitars, that kind of stuff.
Right.
But I'm very into ways certain gear works in certain types of material, and that includes microphones, compressors, EQs, guitars, pedals, you know, that kind of stuff, like the architecture of recording and for live, for that matter too, like how to get across a sound live. Like everyone these days uses these little combo amps that sound great, but there's something missing when I go to shows from the days where our players had these big amps and kind of filled the room in smaller clubs, where these combo amps, you know, I know it's coming through the PA too, but you know, if you noticed when we played in DC, I have this massive like 70s Fender cabinet.
Yeah.
With I want on it. And anyway, so I'm into that gear, not because it's the most vintage, expensive, whatever. The amp kind of has become, but it's just because it moves a certain frequency.
Okay.
And it hits your body a certain way. So I'm a real, I'm a connoisseur chef of sounds like that sounds that feel good, taste good, you know?
Right.
So I'm a gearhead in that sense, you know, gear that pushes those emotional buttons, you know. That's why I still have the Mellotron.
Oh, wow, man.
This is my studio, by the way. It's a mess right now. I don't know if you can see it.
Yeah, I can see it. It's awesome. Well, because you get this great sound on songs like So Strange and The Possessions. You get this like wet, swirly sound on your guitar. I've tried to get something similar to it, and I've failed terribly. What kind of effects do you to get sounds like that?
In the Truly days, I stumbled on chorus echo, tape delay, and it's my first band from Olympia. We had a guy who was our second guitar player who was quite a bit older than us. He was, you know, kind of around in the prog rock days, and then kind of around in the new wave days, and he brought a lot of cool tricks to it. Like the EBO and the Roland chorus echo, and those are all things I ended up doing later. Not maybe directly because of him, but probably now that I think about it. But as far as the sounds go, I just think that kind of sounds I heard in my head, and I was a fan of the shoegaze kind of bands, and even stuff like Cocteau Twins.
Yep.
And My Bloody Valentine. But I wanted to have a very American, very rainy Northwest, you know, kind of sound.
Right.
And to me, like the Roland tape delay, drenched in reverb and saturated and kind of on the verge blowing up. That was my version of Northwest shoegaze or something. Just some kind of like, you know, overtones that you can kind of get lost in.
Yeah. And
kind of enjoy as waves of sound.
That's the sound that I would always hear in my head as I was trying to play, and I heard it in Truly's music. I heard it in some of Failure's music. That was the sound I always wanted to create.
Oh, that's cool, man. So, thank you.
Now working on music with LittleSpirits. How did you meet up with Star Anna? She's after this time it's a duo. I'm assuming it's still a duo.
Yeah.
How did you meet up with Star Anna, and how did that all come about?
Well, she's been a really well-loved, very popular artist in the Northwest for like 10, 15 years. She did even a little touring with Pearl Jam when they did their 20th anniversary for 10.
Right.
And she's, you know, sort of pushed at at an early point in her career as a alt country kind of artist.
Okay.
And I met her probably about a year and a half ago. I had been working for a music program that puts on music at the airport. I'm not doing that anymore as of the last half a year, but I did it for a few years. And she was one of the artists that came through. And out of all of the artists that I had met up there, I mean, well, I'll rephrase that. Out of all the musicians that I met that were doing the gigs at the airport, he was the only one who I really felt was an artist, or one of the few. There's a few others. But so we hit it off, and she was talking a lot about her recording she'd been doing down in L.A., working with Ty Bailey, who plays some keyboards on the new Truly single, and who was our touring keyboard player when we went to Europe. When we reformed. He's now playing in Katy Perry's band, traveling the world the last few years. Anyway, amazing keyboard player. And anyway, they were working together and playing me some of that stuff, and eventually asked me to play guitar on her new record. And then next thing you know, she had a bunch of gigs lined up and decided she didn't want to do them with her band. She wanted to form this duo with me, and that we would do these shows. And so we formed the duo, and I think 3 or 4 days later, we're playing the Crocodile Cafe on a packed Friday night. And then just hit the ground running. And we probably played about 50, 60 shows in the last couple months.
Oh, wow.
Play a lot. Yeah.
Well, you guys have an album Bandcamp that you can that people can buy a physical copy, which what I did because I need to have that CD in my hand or I don't own it. In the immediate future, is there any new music coming out from either band? Yeah,
LittleSpirits is doing a 7-inch for Mike McCready's label, and so we've been working on that this week. It's getting close, and are also working on a full-length album. So we have a few more songs.
Oh, great.
In the can, as they say, that we're working on. We're writing and performing a lot. When that record comes out, I'm not exactly sure, but I think the single will be out hopefully by the end of summer, early fall.
Okay.
And who knows, maybe we'll do an EP before the full record comes out. Truly has an EP that we are trying to finish up and put out on a label in Europe, in Holland, and so that will be available domestically in some. That's just try to get the ball rolling with Truly until we get a full record done. I mean, there's also the reissue possibility of Fast Stories, which I get asked about a lot in days. So
from me,
you're one of them. Yeah, definitely. So and we're looking at label Flotation that's doing the latest 7-inch is interested in doing Fast Stories.
Cool.
But we're not sure whether we're going to pull the trigger on that yet or not.
Okay.
We'll wait and see if Capitol is still thinking about it and try to figure out where we stand with them. In the meantime, we might just force the issue on Bandcamp ourselves. It's been remastered. We're going to add some extra tracks to it. It's the remastered Bandcamp version has Aliens on Alcohol, which was on the original record. It's on the double vinyl.
Okay.
And it was supposed to be on the CD, and it just wouldn't fit.
Well, it's a great track. I know it came out on the One Truly EP.
Yeah. That got amputated strictly because of no one could figure out what song to cut. And that seems, and I don't know if that was the right choice or not. I think that there was a big argument about whether it should be that song or So Strange. And it was a tough choice. I picked Aliens on Alcohol. I lost that battle, which was fine. They're both our songs. And so it's fine, but it's good that it'll be included on this new version digitally. And I haven't heard the new master yet, but I had Brooks, who engineered the first Sub Pop EP. He mastered the latest Truly 7-inch, so I trust him, and I don't think he would take things too far or do any damage. So I'm looking forward to hearing that and getting that out, and then trying to force the issue with the vinyl. Get that out early next year. We'll see.
Last thing before I let you go, are you listening to anything right now that might surprise me? Collection that I'm always looking for new stuff to listen to.
A lot of what I listen to. What's that?
Because I'm always looking for new stuff to listen to.
Oh, okay. Always get stumped on this one. and I do listen to a lot of new music. I listen to a lot of old music. Let's see. Well, man, I've been, because it's been a little rainy the last couple of days, and a little gloomy. I listened to Ohio Players on YouTube last night when I cheer myself up, because that was my jam when I was 9 years old. That and Kiss, as I said. So yeah.
Well, there you go. It's Robert Ham. I appreciate your time. Thank you so much for joining me tonight.
Let me sip something.
You got it. I'll join you.
Just water, but anyways, slightly carbonated, so it feels like I'm drinking something with you.
Yeah, I've got some Buffalo Trace bourbon going.
Oh, let's see. I wish now my speed. But it's still early here.